You're welcome, Coach Jon. Jon is here with us today, and he'll be sharing with us more insights on reconciliation. How can we identify God's gifting to us?
I would say that oftentimes it's not something we find in ourselves. However, I would point to if there are some things that you do that seem second nature to you. This is often why we struggle to find it in ourselves. It will be others who see the gift because they see the things that we do naturally or with ease. And so, but oftentimes it's actually experiences and hardships in life that will reveal to us, what we're made of. What helps us to get through the hardest experiences, and what do we do when we experience hardships or others around us who we love experience hardship? How do we step up to serve, whether it's with a word of encouragement and so the other thing I want to be maybe thoughtful of is we are stewards of these gifts. There is a small risk of becoming enamored with the gifts that we possess. And we want to be clear that we are stewards of them. And I keep calling them gifts because we got them free of charge. We didn't earn them through merit. They are not really ours. They are on loan to us while we're on this earth. And so sometimes perhaps there's this idea that with these gifts that we possess, that somehow we might have this very prosperous and abundant life. And I go, well, life isn't really about that. If it so happens that you have the good fortune of being able to earn a living with what you're gifted with, that's a wonderful thing, but it's not the be all and end all. You're really more likely to find out who you are and the gifts that you possess through the hardships and challenges that life puts in your way. And like I said, I listed three. There's nearly dying, there's losing everything in a financial betrayal, and there's being crippled in a freak cycling accident. Each one of these experiences has uncovered or revealed something more in me that I didn't realize that I had. And so I think just being open to the experiences that when your life is in God's care, it doesn't mean you won't experience hardship, but it means hardship can work something or reveal something in you that maybe you didn't realize you had.
Very much. And how can we make sure we glorify God with the gifts He has given us?
Yeah, I think just being reminded every day that I am fragile. It's not that we live in existential dread at all. I don't mean it like that. But just remembering that, maybe if I put it this way, we're a meat suit wrapped around a skeleton with a fat noodle on top. It's a bit of a humorous and a simplified description, but in the one hand, we have these incredibly powerful minds that can conceive of many, many things. And we have these in many ways, incredibly capable bodies that can do wonderful things, but are also incredibly fragile and can come to an end in an instant. To draw from Stoic philosophy, not that I necessarily endorse it, but they have a quote, memento mori, which is just remember that you are mortal. And so I think it's not that we live with existential dread or terror, but there's a reality to life, that this life is limited. And so the gifts that we have, we want to be good stewards of it, but we really need God's Spirit to guide us in that. And sometimes it takes, maybe I'll very quickly describe something. So let's just say we're born with a gift. We don't know what that gift is. Sometimes people will see that gift in us. They'll tell us about it. There's other times where we'll become lifted up in that gift. Hey, look at this. I do this really well. I feel good when I do this thing. People give me praise when I do this thing, and da-da-da-da-da. And then life will hand you experiences that humble you, and you'll discover the limitations of that gift, like what happened to me. Sometimes you'll want to discard your gift. Sometimes you wish that you didn't have your gift. Sometimes you'll wish that your life there was a different path that you were called or asked to go down, and so on and so forth. But eventually you get to a place where you go, okay, I recognize that left in my own hands, I often will be brought to ruin or despair, or just I will not become closer to God with these gifts. And so I actually have to make sure that I go to God every day and say, these gifts that you've given me, how can I use them in service to you today? Glory to God isn't necessarily always verbalizing those words, but it's just acknowledging that I have these things because of the one who created me. So my life points to God. The light that is in my heart points to God. When we think about Christ in us, Jesus said, a city set on a hill can't be hid. You are the light of the world. Let your light, therefore, shine before men, that they see your good works and praise God who is in heaven. In other words, humility is not hiding and pretending we don't exist or pretending we're worthless. Humility is recognizing that we have been given gifts by God to be stewards of. We use those gifts in everyday life, living before others, in whatever way it is, whatever path of life is open to us. But we just remember that they are gifts, and they come from God, and that we are mortal.
We have three more questions I would like you to help us with, and then finally you'll give us your final word of encouragement before we leave. I'm going to ask you three hard questions, and I think you don't mind. Yes, of course.
You go right ahead.
Yes, the first one is whether you have unconditionally forgiven. Forgive me if I call them monsters the monsters who tried to murder you in Africa?
Yes, I have, as a matter of fact. Forgiveness is a journey, though. I'll say that. So it began, so after it happened, there was a change in me. I wanted to kill people. I never acted on those urges, those impulses, but I wanted to kill people. I wanted to somehow take what was taken from me in a very unjust situation, but there was a rational part of me that recognized this is not who I am. And I became exhausted with being angry and vengeful and spiteful all the time. And there's that expression, it's like drinking poison and trying to hurt the other person. And so I recognized I had to go on this journey of forgiveness. But how do you forgive people who wanted to kill you? Well, they didn't actually know me. It wasn't necessarily about me. We could say it was maybe about my skin color. I'm not offended by it. I'm not hurt by it because I say I'm potentially a representation of something he felt had been a source of historical oppression. That's a mouthful. But anyways, we'll use the economy of words. And so I asked the question, what happened to these men? What happened to them where this is the life they were living? Because they had murdered a man the night before. They eventually were caught. I didn't go back for the court case. I was too traumatized to really bring myself back there for the court case and to face them again. But they were caught. But I had to ask myself, what happened to these men? Why is this what they were doing with their life? In a different circumstance, in a different life, would they be doing this? Probably not. And it's not to excuse their behaviors, but it's to say, to start to cultivate some degree of compassion for who they are and whatever they must be struggling with or tormented with that led them to this path in life. Forgiveness for me was not just saying, I forgive you, but I hope God kills you. It was, I forgive you, and I hope God sees your heart and judges you righteously. In other words, I forgive you, but I hope God smites you. No. It's to say, I actually cannot judge you righteously because I have a limited, finite, and biased human heart, and you hurt me. And so I'm going to commit all judgment to God. I let go of all wishes for vengeance, pain, and suffering you brought on you, and I just trust you to God's righteous judgment. That was, I can describe it in a couple sentences, but that was a process that took a number of months to really cultivate. Every time the rage would come back, the anger, the desire for justice and so on, was to work to cultivate compassion and go to God and say, I'm wanting to give this to you. I want to trust this to your judgment, so I don't carry this weight and this burden with me anymore.
Yes, I am quite concerned about some other people who might be afraid to come to some areas. Obviously, I hope this was an isolated area.
Yes.
And an isolated incident.
I would like to think so. I mean, one of my great laments, just as a side note, one of my great laments is that in our time in South Africa, we didn't really get the opportunity to explore more of the African continent. There's so many places. My wife and I have been very privileged to travel quite a bit, and we love to travel and explore the world. And we think the one thing that travel does is it reminds us of our common humanity. There's so much good in the world. We can get a distorted perspective because there's a lot of evil, there's a lot of hardship, there's a lot of heartbreaking, terrible things that happen. But there's also a lot of good. There's a lot of beautiful people around the world. And we've had the privilege to meet people from a number of countries all around the world. And at the end of the day, a lot of us are just struggling through this thing called life. And when we can see sort of our common, our shared humanity, it's a wonderful thing. And when we can actually be okay with our differences too. Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, we all bleed red, right?
Yes, and then the second, I would like to ask you to share your wisdom for people who can travel to such places, isolated. I want to insist these are isolated areas, but of course, what is your wisdom to people who travel so that they can remain safe using your experience?
Well, one, I would say, don't assume that it can't happen to you, because it can. You can't plan for every possible contingency. There was no way I could have preemptively figured out this was going to happen to me. And so, but take prudent precaution. In other words, don't go to areas that are prone to violence. When you come from a first world country, we lived in secondhand clothes, and we didn't wear any jewelry, didn't carry any fancy electronics, things like that. We basically maintained a very similar standard to those that we were sort of walking with. So we didn't elevate ourselves in status above anybody else. Connect with locals where you can. It's wonderful if you have a faith and you can make a faith group connection, because then people who live in the area can also help to keep you safe. That's a real blessing as well. So I think in the age of the internet, it shouldn't be so difficult to connect with people, so that if you do go to a place, you can be met with warmth and human welcome, and maybe a little bit of an established relationship. I think that makes a huge difference as well.
Thank you very much. And one more before we close. Yes, when you realize God has given you a rare gift, how can you ensure you remain submissive so that the same gift does not lead you away from Him?
That's a really good question. God had to really humble me greatly, I would say.
Yes.
In other words, it took losing all of my money, being taken advantage of, losing everything in business, to teach me that I can't trust in my ability to generate money in business. It took nearly losing my life to learn that I can't trust in like guaranteed years to old age, and I can't trust in being a smart Christian, that I have to yield my heart to God. It took suffering a crippling injury and a freak cycling accident to remind me that my story isn't about my weight loss. It's actually a journey of resilience and overcoming hardship. And it's not that I'm special, in fact, it's the opposite of that. It's showing people that like our shared common humanity means that within each one of us there lies this resilience and this ability to overcome great difficulty with the help of God. I think the humbling experiences showed me the limitations of my gift, and realized that like in my own stewardship it leads to loss and it leads to great difficulty. And so maybe it's not so hard to be humble because I'm also middle-aged and a gray beard and I have enough life experience to sort of to realize that the illusions of grandeur aren't really all they're made out to be. I have the great privilege of being a father to 2 beautiful boys and married to a wife of 20 years. I tell you what, they keep me humble too. Having children is one of the greatest gifts that could ever happen to us, because our actions are under scrutiny and children have no filter and they tell things exactly as they are. And I think that also helps keep me humble.
Thank you. And of course, hosting you on this podcast is one of the great things I appreciate God for. Thank you so much. And your final message to our audience, and then we close.
I would say appreciate every experience that comes your way and trust it to the care of God, because this life isn't the final destination. And so each experience, when given over to God, can work eternal riches in you. And at the end of life, no matter how many years you're granted, you'll never regret giving your life to God.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure hosting you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.